Got the glasses on for work still. Gotta turn the car off. Get this out. What's cracking, y'all? Can't be doing the co-host. This is where I do my thing. Stick around for some wisdom and knowledge if you want to, though. And don't claim to have the authority of it or nothing. Just sharing my experience. It's just one way to look at wisdom. There's many ways to look at wisdom. I was thinking about that on the way out here. How wisdom can cause you to think about it in different ways. You know, we're supposed to have wisdom in all these different ways. It says to seek wisdom, you know, above all things, get an understanding. But wisdom isn't something that can be institutionalized. Wisdom is something that you can gain through experience, through perception, awareness. You know, it expands and grows over time. And then you can tap into the etheric part of wisdom, you know, where you can call it source, God, whatever you want to call it, ethereal, etheric, akashic, source, yourself, tapping into your highest self, all of that. Either way, however you want to look at it, there's many different ways to describe it. And, you know, I'm not here to say this is, it's one way or the other. You know, I'm just sitting here sharing my experience of what I see in life and how people perceive things and why. And this is just about, you know, wisdom, how they obtain it and how they believe about it. Even the success of it, you know, determines how far people go in their life. And it just depends on how they're looking at wisdom, but it can't be institutionalized. Wisdom is not reserved for any one person. Anyone trying to convince you, you know, that wisdom is just delegated to, like, you know, church or, you know, a priest, or, you know, it's just God given and only that person can have wisdom. You know, that's kind of what, it's just not reserved for any one person. Anyone trying to convince you of that is insecure in that area. A lot of people were conditioned to believe wisdom only exists inside title systems, institutions, or authority figures, because it keeps people dependent on external validation instead of trusting their own awareness, their own source, their own ethereal connection to the Akash. All of that stuff, you know. Some people feel threatened the moment you begin speaking from lived experience with confidence, because your self-trust exposes how much of their identity was built around needing permission to feel valuable in that moment. You know, if somebody's trying to portray like, well, I have this wisdom and you don't, and I'm up here and you're down here, like, that's not number one, it's not helping anything, because it's putting, you know, yourself above measure. And you might be great at that one area or maybe a couple, but what about some other things? Let's start moving some rocks around and see what we find. So it's just not like it's not delegated to one person or one thing or one institution, but it can feel like that. Wisdom has always existed within observation, suffering, reflection, mistakes, adaptation, awareness, survival, and lived experience. Human beings were learning from life long before, you know, all these philosophies and books were written, and, you know, all these insights that people have all along the way. You know, life has been lifing for a while. Wisdom has always existed within observation, suffering, reflection, mistakes, adaptation, awareness, survival, lived experience. Human beings were learning from life itself long before systems began claiming ownership of knowledge. And that's all I'm saying. When somebody starts to claim ownership of knowledge and wisdom that they only possess, and I'm the only one, run. At least in that moment. Because it's not coming from that place of love anymore. It's coming from a place of, you know, it's outside of that. You know, people have been learning to live life long before systems began claiming ownership of knowledge, over knowledge. To gain a degree, You have to want to learn what others believe in. No, thank you. I believe in myself. And this is just for me only. Not everybody, is designed to want to go learn what other people believe in. Because I choose to believe in myself more so than anything. And if that's the path that I choose to go down, then that'll change. If that changes, then I will. But to gain a degree, you have to want to learn what others believe in. This does not mean all education is useless. It means no institution should become more trusted than your own direct experience with reality. And I've been pounding this thing for a while about your own reality and what is your reality speaking to you? What is your experience telling you? Because life is a great teacher if you're aware and paying attention to what it's teaching you, because it's always teaching us. Some people spend their entire lives becoming experts in systems while remaining completely disconnected from themselves emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, internally. So they're going after a degree. They're going after something that's really not even, it's not even in the direction they want it to be. Let's say you want to be a doctor and you want to heal and you want to do all these things and it's in you. And then you start doing it and you find out that once you're all in there, it's not what you thought it was, because it's somebody else's belief system that was outside of your own. But if you believe in yourself enough, you can take that same exact thing and produce the same results, whether it's in another country, in another form, of helping, because there's different forms of medicine in the way they practice, because people figured it out. Oh, I can't do it within this way. Then I'll do it the holistic way and open up. And there's different stuff, but it's just somebody trusting in themselves more so than what is laying down before them, because greatness is being found when you're tapping into yourself, into the ethereal, into the source, into the highest self, that's where greatness is found. That's how somebody can say, oh, this is the way it is. And that's their belief. And they created that way. And then you're tapping into your ethereal and you can better that. You can take it a step further because you believed beyond that and decided to go beyond it, because it doesn't make sense in the physical. When we put so much stock in somebody else's wisdom and somebody else's philosophy and somebody else's knowledge, instead of truly tapping into our own and having that stuff derive from here. Believing in yourself, because revolutionary in a world constantly trying to convince people they are incomplete without external approval, labels, credentials, or hierarchy. There's a video I saw this lady saying she had figured some shit out about psychosis or schizophrenia and glucose levels. And the way she was speaking it was coming from that place of knowing. She might not have all the pieces and all, because she's tapping into the etheric, the Akashic. She's getting bits of knowledge and of information that she did not possess and nobody gave it to her. So she's tapping into herself, into the etheric, into the source, and it's coming to her, and the information she's explaining. And she's like, I just need Yale to get a hold of this so I can do a study. And it's just you can do that, but you can also do the study on your own accord and gather up all this stuff and get people and go, hey, because I know there's people that would love to get their loved ones in a little, experience little deal, say, hey, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but let's try this glucose, managing your glucose levels with this food diet or whatever, and just see what happens. It's no commitment to, let's just see what happens and just do a little, get some evidence. And then, do your own stuff. Why are we asking for permission is my point. From the system that's already in place and wants to take control over it and dominate it. And if it's really good, they got to market it and sell it and all that, instead of just kind of working out of your own knowing. And I talked about not needing permission in the last live to do things in your life because we're conditioned to, and just doing things upon your own knowing and just seeing it through and following it out. Degrees do not determine success. A person's ability to change their life for the better does. A person's level of success isn't going to matter on a piece of paper or any of that. Where did you come from? Where are you now? How far did you take it from where you was to where you are? Only the person that's taken that journey can determine what success looks like. And the body of evidence is going to be behind them moving forward. And you're not going to need anybody to come and tell you that, you know, you're successful because of this or successful, because all you got to do is look behind here and be like, look at all that body of evidence. Like, that's success, because there's plenty of people that didn't make it. There's plenty of people that didn't, you know, come up out of the things that I was able to come up out of. So to me, that's successful. And that's not determined or hinged upon anybody's freaking expectation or of what success is or what it should look like, because it's only going to be spoken from that person's experience. So of course it's not going to perfectly align with yours, because it's your experience and it's your level of success that you get to gauge. There are people with degrees who are miserable, emotionally broken, dishonest, disconnected, and trapped in cycles they can't escape. Information alone does not transform a person. You can learn and study all the stuff you want to, and you can apply a lot of stuff. But if it's not coming from your essence, you're always going to be unaligned, and you're going to constantly be reminded in all these various ways. You will be reminded in all kinds of various ways. Real success is visible through growth, healing, adaptability, self-awareness, discipline, peace, emotional intelligence, and the ability to improve your life despite what tried to break you. That is success. Does it need to be explained? You know, does it have to be spelled out whenever it's like that? You're the one that's determined the level of success. Real success is visible through growth, healing, adaptability, self-awareness, discipline, peace, emotional intelligence, and the ability to improve your life despite what tried to break you. Is that not proof enough? You know, learning and growing through all these dispensations in life, that's successful. You can add a degree and call that success too if you want to, but it's not dependent upon it, is all I'm saying. Some of the wisest people on earth would never survive inside systems designed to measure intelligence through obedience and repetition alone. And I'm one of them. I already know I'm not built for school. I'm not going to learn somebody else's information that they believed in, that they got from somebody else, or any of that shit. I'm more interested in leveling up my abilities in the best way that I know how, in the best way that I see fit, and determine what that looks like and what success looks like in that. And at any given time, if a degree is necessary, then I'll determine that. It won't be determined for me, and it would be for a very specific reason. But that's not in my nature to go try to learn anymore like I used to. Go try to learn what somebody else is trying to, you know, teach me in the area that I already know about. Like, I need to seek out and find remedies to, and just listen to my inner knowing. And I know that entails listening to other people share their experiences and shit. I'm not saying that. It's just to say, this is the degree. This is my measure of success. As long as if I have this degree or this title, that's not where success is found. That's not, it has to be determined by you and your experience and where you came from. Because there's plenty of people that have had similar experiences that were not able to make it as far as you brought it. And there's something to be said about that. If they have to make you feel small in order to feel big, it's time for new company. You know, when somebody's always trying to make you feel down here just so they can feel bigger, it's time to find new company. It's time to find new people to hang around with, because you can't keep subjecting yourself to that. And all having experience is not like you can't have a bad day. You know, if people can't, I'm talking about consistency. When somebody has to consistently make themselves feel bigger, then it's time for a new dynamic change. Healthy people do not need to belittle each other in order to feel powerful. People who constantly diminish others are usually fighting feelings of inadequacy. They've never fully confronted within themselves. That's where that usually stems from. You know, when somebody has to make you feel small in order for them to feel big, it's time to find new company. And it's got to be a consistent thing too, you know. When somebody's doing that, consistently making themselves feel bigger, and then you're feeling like, just so you can feel bigger, you're going to try to make me feel smaller. Like, you got to be able to recognize it whenever it starts to become a pattern. People who constantly diminish others are usually fighting feelings of inadequacy they've never fully confronted within themselves. And it just comes out in that form. And it's just like they got to do that in order to feel, you know, like they're worthy. It's a part of worthiness and inadequacy, insecurity. A lot of emotional abuse hides behind sarcasm, intellectual superiority, fake concern, passive aggression, correction addiction, public embarrassment, and subtle invalidation disguised as help. You know, the moment a person starts to think for themselves and gain traction, and they were around people that helped them get there and stuff, and they start to do their own thing, they want to be reminded who got them there and all of that stuff. Instead of realizing like they still had to take the information and apply it and go through the grind and do the things necessary to make it happen. So it's just an awareness of how this stuff disguises itself as help after a while. The right people expand your nervous system instead of shrinking it. You should not have to abandon your confidence every time you enter someone's presence. You should be able to be you. And they should be able to be them. And if that consists of them making you feel smaller so they can feel bigger, it's time to find new company. Pain becomes dangerous when people become... Wait, am I still... Yeah. No, that's the next one. The right people expand your nervous system instead of shrinking it. You should not have to abandon your confidence every time you enter someone's presence. That's the tell. When it's every time. Not just, you know... Because we all have bad days and we want to talk ourselves up and shit, you know. But there's a way to, you know, feel good about yourself. It shouldn't involve tearing somebody else down. That's where the math stops mathing. In a triggered state, the triggered will speak from a place of pain disguised as coherence. Anytime somebody is triggered, you should be able to tell it. Like their pupils change, their facial expressions change, their body chemistry starts to change when somebody's triggered. In a triggered state, the triggered will speak from a place of pain. It's not coherent anymore. Once that trigger is ignited in a person and it starts to take over, there is no coherence anymore. They're speaking from a place of pain. They're speaking from a place of unresolved issues, or they're speaking from a place of unfamiliar ways to like regulate, you know. Triggered people often believe they are communicating logically when they are actually reaching and reacting emotionally from unresolved wounds. Insecurity, fear, shame, jealousy, rejection, suppressed anger. Those are just a few things that people, when they get triggered, they're not going to speak coherently to you. So there's no reason to like go back and forth and try to prove anything in that triggered state. Because when the person is in their triggered state, they are not coherent. All they are doing is reliving in a moment that does not exist in the present moment. For whatever reason, and there's many. Pain becomes dangerous when people become unconscious of it because they start projecting unresolved internal chaos outward instead of convincing themselves they are simply telling the truth. That's what they do. They're telling the truth in that moment. Like they're all triggered up and this is my truth. And of course it is. So what are you going to do looking like coming against it? You know, trying to prove a point, trying to, you know, give your perspective when somebody's in a real triggered state. Some people do not attack you because you are wrong. They attack you because your existence activates something inside themselves they're struggling to suppress. And it just comes out. You can say something from your experience that belongs directly to you. And it can affect another person in such a way that it triggers them Even if it's just similar, it just ignites something in them where they're not going to start speaking coherent after that trigger has been triggered. And you're going to think that you're talking to somebody and they're upset at you and they're coming at you, and all they're doing is speaking from that place of fucking pain, unresolved issues. And then you will get mad and like cut each other off or not talk to each other or say some out of pocket shit back, instead of just recognizing in that moment everything being said after the trigger is meaningless. And all it's going to do is continue the trigger. It's going to compound it. It's going to make it bigger and grander, because that's how triggers work. Once it goes off, the trigger it's on and in motion. It's popping. Pain becomes dangerous when people become unconscious of it because they start projecting unresolved internal chaos outward while convincing themselves they are simply telling the truth. The whole time, all of it's spewing forth justifiably in their own mind. In that emotionally abandoned situation. They're just emotionally all abandoned. And I'm just speaking from a place that I know of, because this is all self-derived. It becomes dangerous when you become unconscious of it because you start projecting unresolved internal chaos outward while convincing yourself you're simply telling the truth. Some people do not attack you because they are wrong. They attack you because your existence activates something inside themselves they are struggling to suppress. And you just brought it out. And this is always stuff that's been stuffed down and stuffed down and stuffed down. It gets triggered and it comes out and it comes out and it comes out. A triggered person will spew all sorts of bullshit they've been stuffing down. That's what happens. In that moment, they just start spewing all kinds of bullshit. And all that bullshit is nothing but stuff they've just stuffed down their whole life or for months or whatever. Human beings can only suppress unresolved emotions for so long before eventually leaks through behavior, language, projection, bitterness, emotional outbursts, manipulation, or misplaced aggression. All of it. You can only suppress the unresolved for so long before it has to come out. And then it explodes, man. And then before that, it's in your body. It's making you tense in places you don't even really know you're tense because you're unconscious of this stuff, like I said. Because we're not only suppressing unresolved emotions for so long before it eventually leaks through behavior, like it becomes impossible to be around. Triggered people that can't regulate are impossible to be around in those triggered states. And if you are, look out, because it's not a good experience for the other party or the person really that's triggered. Most overreactions are not actually about the present moment. They're accumulated emotional residue finally looking for somewhere to land. And I said, even like I explained it to my son this morning, we take this thing as far as we can as parents. My mom took it further than her mom in ways and had me. I broke away and took it a lot further and had my kids. And now my kids don't have to put up with the same amount of fuckery. But I said, but there's still residue. It's not the same level, but there's definitely residue left over from all the stuff overcoming while I raised you. Like, that's a given. Most overreactions are not actually about the present moment. They are accumulated emotional residue finally looking for somewhere to land. When someone erupts disproportionately, you're often witnessing years of unresolved pain colliding with the moment that simply exposed it. And all you got to do is recognize it in that state and back off. Back off when somebody's triggered in that state, because all you're going to do is make it worse. Because it's not going to be coherent. It's not going to be coming from the place in the present moment. They have to figure out the way and the ability to ground themselves in the present moment to start to have that trigger dissipate and realize that they're not in that place or in that environment anymore, that they're literally in the moment. That's why it's called grounding, because your ethereal body is somewhere else, experiencing something else. And you have to be able to bring it back and ground it in the present moment. And you have to learn how to do this. And what is allowing me to do it at a faster pace is being able to recognize it in myself immediately. And then whenever I'm recognizing it in the people, the energy that comes along with it, I can recognize it a lot faster. And then I realize I'm wasting my breath trying to have a conversation, because it just happened the other day where I said something based from my experience and things that I observed and know to be true for myself. But the other person had a different experience and believed differently, and it triggered them. And then I watched themselves spew all this bullshit. And I started to, and I was like, they're in a triggered state. And all I got to do is just let them talk. Because when a person starts to talk and they're being foolish and they're saying foolish things, the more they talk and the more they start to understand what they're doing and saying and how they're behaving. And suddenly you see a shift. You start to see a shift in a person because they're left to deal with themselves and the unresolved. And it gives them another chance to start to resolve some of that stuff. And whether they do in that moment or later is up to them. But it's just part of the experience. And so whenever you recognize it, you let it do its thing, and you don't interrupt it. When someone erupts disproportionately, you are often witnessing years of unresolved pain colliding with the moment that simply exposed it. The moment people can no longer control your perception of yourself, they are forced to confront the instability of their own. And that's all I did, was just like, hey, I'm not gonna force my insecurity or my instability on you and try to make you to believe what I experience and know to be true from my perception. And I'm going to just let you spew all this stuff out and just listen and let the rest handle. Let this whole thing just kind of handle itself. And you'll be surprised at how much faster a triggered state can be calmed down when you just let a triggered person do all the talking. Because it causes themselves to have to listen to what they're actually putting out into the ether. Because it's coming from in here and coming out into the ether and mixing around and doing all this shit. And if you just let it do its thing, it will do its thing. And you won't have to add to it. And then you can both walk away with self-reflection and learn from the experience. And then everybody can grow in the moment. Regardless, you can't get away from you and what the experience is teaching you. You can choose to ignore it. You can choose to look at it all different ways, but like, you had the experience. So like, are you going to use it to level yourself up? And that goes both ways for the person that was triggered and me, and how I handled the situation and how I handle future situations. Because to me, life is our greatest teacher when we're aware and we're paying attention to it. I keep saying that. But that's my time right on the dot. I finished right on the dot. Wisdom cannot be institutionalized. It's not reserved for any one person, place, or thing. You can gain it through all kinds of different ways. Even tapping into the ethereal or the Akashic or the highest self or source. Like, yeah, it's just not reserved. Knowledge isn't, nobody has a monopoly on knowledge. Just understand that you can derive it from inside here. You don't need anybody to tell you about it. It can literally be self-derived. But that's my time, guys. I got to go. Thanks for hanging out with me.